Hi. My name is Fumilola Asa, and this is video 2 of 2 of my share on an excerpt of a book that I recently wrote and published. Take stock of who you have become on the journey to becoming. If you're just watching this and you haven't seen part 1 of 2, I jumped on the videos in this 2-part series to share some insights from a chapter of the book called, Take Stock of Your Resources. And often when people think about resources, they're thinking finances, ideas. But in this book, the lens that I put on for resources is in 4 parts. Your people resource, time as a resource, your goodwill and credibility as the third resource, and the fourth one being your financial resources. I did a part 1 of this talking about the goodwill and credibility. And so if you haven't already seen that, I totally recommend that you go watch that video to ginger you and inspire you and to provide a lens and a light bulb around the things you can do to grow your credibility and goodwill so that it can be a critical resource for you on your journey of impact and purpose. And so this second part, I will just read the section of the book. So a sub-chapter of chapter 4 of the book. This time I'm talking about time as a resource. So I'll read through it and hopefully that inspires you to reflect on your time resource and also be inspired enough to get the book and read the rest of the book. And so without much ado, I'll just go into this. Again, this is part 2 of 2. So if you haven't already seen 1 of 2, you're missing out something that you should go check out. So hopefully you're going to rush over and check that out right after listening to this. All right, so let's get into it. And so I'm on page 193 of the book. 193 is chapter 5 of the book. The book has an introduction, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is where I am, and then there's 6, 7, 8, and then some closing comments. So it is packed. A trial will convince you is the best I can say on this book. I've received great feedback already from those who have bothered to read it, who have had the time to read it. And I'm sure that it'll be the same for you. Light bulbs come up when you read this book. All right, so enough with the marketing. Let's read talk about time as a resource. And so the sub-chapter says, take stock of your time and energy utilization. What am I spending my time on? What am I prioritizing? So there's a quote that starts this, and it comes actually from the Bible. It says, I must work the work of him that sent me. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. And that's in the Holy Bible, John chapter 9, verse 4. All right, so to the actual text of the sub-chapter. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and so time continues to tick by in the chronological order of life. It represents a finite resource for each person, starting with the day that we are born to the day that we leave Mother Earth. With time also comes the energy cycle, as it starts to build up from childhood into youth and somewhat plateaus for some time in adulthood until it starts the downward trend as age catches up with an individual. The rhythm of the cycle of energy is unique to everyone, impacted by many factors such as genetics, lifestyle, self-care, and others. Hence, it's not uncommon to see a boisterous 50 to 60-year-old who is full of life, while a young adult might be struggling to keep it all together. However, regardless of this relativity, everyone still succumbs to his or her own curve of energy with time. It's against the backdrop of the limited nature of a person's energy and time that time is categorized as a critical enabler that must be utilized appropriately in line with a person's life assignment, leveraging opportunities and making the journey count. Within the broader spectrum of the time for an individual's sojourn on Earth, there are also other limits within specific blocks of activities and key milestones in life. It is therefore important that the right focus is placed on how you spend your time. In the introductory chapter of this book, I discussed the concept of living life without noticing, and then suddenly realizing that so much time has passed by, and yet you're unable to put your finger on what you have done with the time. This manifests in many micro formats, such as when you ask the questions, how did today fly by so fast? What have I accomplished this week? How can it be the last quarter of the year already? Where did all of my vacation go? And so on. Unfortunately, while some opportunities may present themselves again, time spent can never be recovered in the form spent. Therefore, if there is one resource that must be guarded jealously, it is time. Yet, unfortunately, it is often the most squandered until it is too late. What do you spend your time on? Are those activities aligned with your broader assignment? How much time do you spend to attend to your well-being to enable the carrier of the message of your life, the earthen vessels that carry divine treasures? What are you prioritizing in the use of your time? One of the thieves of time manifests in the forms of distraction that keep your attention away from critical activities that are required for your true growth on your journey to becoming. Some of these distractions are real issues that require some attention. However, when they become the only point of focus, rendering you immobile on life's path, then they qualify as distractions. When I think about my life's path to this point, I realize that I've had my fair share of these issues. One that comes to mind for me is the waiting journey of over 8 years after marriage before welcoming the pregnancy of my son. I mentioned this in passing in the preceding chapter, where I discussed how some of my greatest life lessons came through my challenging times, of which this one ranks high. In the early periods, it was not a big deal as I'd gotten married relatively young. But as months turned into years, it became a strong focus with time marked from one menstrual period to the other, with key milestones like tracking ovulation cycles, and then the disappointment and the crying when the monthly unwelcome guest at the time arrived as a reminder of another failed attempt at motherhood in that month. In the context of breaking out of my distractions, at some point during that period, I realized that my whole life did not have to come to a complete halt because I was waiting. I recall having a conversation with a friend and colleague who had also gone through a similar journey, and we agreed that the best decision that we made at the time was to move on with life while we waited, while we still attempted to carry out necessary interventions with childbirth. We had realized at the time that when people go through delays in one phase of life or the other, they finally realize that so much time has been spent relatively immobile. Hence, when that which has been waited for eventually arrives, then they start to chase many other milestones that may have been easier to tackle during the period of delay. In my case, while I waited, I was active in my faith with church activities and focused on my development. I completed a part-time MBA during the process, which proved to be a springboard for a career redirection. Nowadays, as I am on another part-time study on a doctoral program, while combining that with a full-time job, other commitments, and motherhood, I understand that it's a different kettle of fish. It's important to make a critical assessment of the things that you are focused on and be realistic in identifying what has become a distraction. That task or activity may be a critical step in your life's journey. However, the question is it a critical path step without which everything else cannot be completed? An analogy that I once used to make the distinction of this categorization of important activities draws from memories of writing exams in secondary school and as an undergraduate. I recall that those exams often involved several questions that were required to be answered. And then there was usually a certain question number 2, or maybe 3 or 4 of about 6 questions that just seemed so hard to solve. So as not to be stumped on hard questions, we were often guided during exam preparations to always note down the key answer points to all the questions before deep diving into each question. Despite jotting down these key points though, people who tend to be sequential in their thought process would find it hard to move past this hard question to others. The interesting thing is often that those questions are not always prerequisites to the next question. So those individuals who move past this hard question would tend to complete all others and then return for a revisit of the question with less pressure and a clearer mind. Sadly, those who cannot seem to get past the question suddenly get jolted into reality of how bad their situation is when they get some reminders such as 30 minutes more to go, yelled out by the exam invigilator. The stress levels increase in the realization of how many more questions need to be completed before the final time call for the exam. With the now further clouded mind, they do a poor job with the rest of the questions and often likely fail the exam. They do poorly in the overall exam because they could not seem to get past this critical question that was not critical path. They were distracted by an insurmountable challenge and wasted time on that spot that could have been put to better use elsewhere that would have compensated for the hard question. So many situations in life present in the form of these exam scenarios, with the popular hard questions becoming an insurmountable distracting thief of time, such as a much sought job change, a professional exam, and many others. Consciously taking stock to recognize these, and with the guiding hand of the all-knowing creator who knows the end from the beginning, you can refocus. Interestingly, in some instances, all that is needed is a little time to breathe, while the wheels that you do not control continue to spin in the background to bring the results that you are instead desperately throwing more energy at without success. Trust me, I have my fair shares of answers coming in unexpected ways that seem too good to be true for a challenge that gave me sleepless nights. I realized that God has a great sense of humor. Is it then easy to just leave those issues unattended to? The answer is no. However, an understanding of where it fits in the grand scheme of things on your impact journey may help with directing attention to other equally critical steps to drive robustness and improve the overall quality of your life and impacts. You must learn to make the distinction between your critical steps versus your critical path steps. The question to ask yourself is, what is really hanging on the outcome of this step? Do not get timed out on the full exploration of the benefits of a time, milestone, period in life, or relationship opportunities because you're so consumed by that seemingly overwhelming challenge. Take stock of your time utilization. Thank you. So that was the subchapter on time. And it's very profound because time is the one thing that we often take for granted. Like, I'll get to it, I'll do it later. And then suddenly it feels like we have to rush through everything because we never really had the time because we were stumped on that one thing that seemed insurmountable. I don't know what that represents to you. Like I said in the book, I've had my fair share of things like that, but being able to move past and make a true assessment to yourself as to, should I really stop all of my life endeavors because of this step? Is it really a critical path step without which everything else cannot be completed? If not, take the time, breathe, look at how you're spending your time, look at the opportunities that are bound around you in so many other places, like I already discussed in the book, around your assignment, your opportunities and your giftings. And you'll be surprised how sometimes this insurmountable challenge that is distracting you gets resolved if you just take the time to breathe and trust the ever spinning wheels of the hands that you don't control. Well, that was that on the time. Again, this is part 2 of 2. I already shared one exam excerpt on your credibility and goodwill. This is on time. There are tons of things in there. I share about your well-being from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, to talk about your assignment and how your passion, the circumstances of your birth, the circumstances of your nurture, and your instructions and your target audience all tie together to determine what your assignment really is. Talk about opportunities to grow, the little opportunities that become footholds to bigger opportunities. Talk about your giftings, recognizing your critical giftings, the things that make you unique and you. I talk about your journey. I love the chapter on journey because it was really fundamental to me even writing this book, being able to stop and recognize the journey that I've been on, the growth that has happened on the journey, the reason I've been on the path that I've been on, and why I am an example or a data point to somebody out there on what you can make out of your life if you just take out time to reflect on the journey that you have been on. I talk about those resources, which I talked about now, and I talk then about why you should take stock. One of the things I talk about is that you can be shortchanged and you not even realize it if you don't take stock. I share an example that is so dear to my heart, like somebody who walked away feeling like you had achieved something and you were just much lighter on destiny's radar. I talk about, how to take stock, being intentional, being able to separate in the moment to realize what has happened to you, talking about what do you do with the learnings that you're finding out and taking stock, because you can't be a perpetual student of life. You are made for impact. You should translate the reflections into impact, into actions. And there are ways to do that, the structures that you build. Second, I talk about the grit that you need in the murky middle. Everyone gets to that point where all of that initial excitement just drowns out and you're wondering, what have I gotten myself into? Do I even know what I'm doing? Do I know where I'm going? That's where grit and the structures that you have put in place come into play. And I also talk about the critical element of time, this time around, from the perspective of how time might just be all that you need to see the results of the effort that you have been putting into place. I don't know how else to tell you that this is a packed book. Hurry and get your copy of it and share with me what resonates with you. I really am looking forward to feedback. Every time somebody has talked to me about the book, it has really been heartwarming to realize that it was really worth the effort. And I know that it's something that you need at a time like this so that you can refocus, re-strategize, be reinforced, regardless of where you are on your journey to becoming. I wish you a transformational time ahead. I look forward to hearing your wins as you get the book and read the book, and as you gift it to somebody and keep the fire burning of people who are recognizing why they are here, who they are, who they've become, and how they need to get to where they need to be at. Thank you. My name is Fumilola Asa, a transformational insights translator. I look forward to hearing your wins. Thank you.